Welcome, everyone. The ICMA Learning Lab is pleased to present this online education program, Misinformation Management, Protecting Public Trust, brought to you by ICMA partner Zencity. Today's presentation will last up to 60 minutes and includes a question and answer opportunity, so please submit your questions at any time using the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen. During Q&A, our presenters will answer as many questions as time allows. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Angela Wilson, the Deputy Public Information Officer for the town of Frederick, Colorado, Elizabeth Saab, the Chief of Strategy, Engagement, and Alignment for the City of Dallas, Texas, and Lee Feldman, the former City Manager of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as well as the former ICMA Executive Board President. Speakers, welcome to the program.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's ICMA Zencity Impact webinar. My name is Lee Feldman. As Julian just mentioned, I'm a past recovering city manager and a past president of ICMA, and today serve as the senior advisor for local government strategy at Zencity, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Thank you all for joining us. Before we dive into our discussion, let me give you a quick introduction to Zencity. Zencity is the leading community engagement and analytics platform designed to help local governments, both cities and counties, make data-driven decisions that truly reflect their residents' needs. Through AI-driven insights, we help cities, counties, and law enforcement agencies better understand community sentiment, enhance public safety strategies, and build and earn trust with residents. This webinar is part of our Zencity Impact series, an initiative which we have focused on bringing together professionals in local government and civic engagement to share best practices, challenges, and solutions. To continue the conversation beyond today, we invite you to join our LinkedIn group, Zencity Impact Local Government USA. It's a space where you can safely share and keep discussing insights from today's session and connect with peers in the industry. You can find the link in the chat. Today, we're going to discuss misinformation management. Ultimately, how do we protect public trust? And I'm thrilled to have joining with me today Angela Wilson, who's the Deputy Public Information Officer for the town of Frederick, Colorado, and Elizabeth Saab, who's the Chief of Strategy, Engagement, and Alignment for the City of Dallas, Texas, and is also currently serving in the Chief of Staff role. So I'm going to just let Angela and then Elizabeth just do a quick introduction as to their background to give you more context as to their insight. Angela? Angela, you are on mute. See, I just finished my major role of moderator.
There you go. My first webinar starting off great. I'm in Colorado, that's along the front range of the Rocky Mountains, and I began my career in local government in 2017. Brought on board as an events coordinator. Small town, about 8,000 people at the time, and just two folks in communications. And I've kind of worked my way up and built a team that includes now a communications specialist who is our events manager, digital media specialist, and we just brought a new team member on board to help us with the heavy lift of events and accessibility in compliance in Colorado. So I'm very excited to be here and live this every day. So I'm excited to meet Lee and Elizabeth.
And Elizabeth, you have an interesting background coming from the other side of information on the reporting side.
Yes. Well, first, thank you, Lee, for having Angela and me here today. I'm excited to be on with Angela. And thanks to everybody who is joining us for the webinar. I can't see everyone that's here, but we're excited to talk to you guys today about misinformation management. I do come from the other side. I call it the dark side. I am a recovering reporter. I spent about 10 years on television at the local and national levels. I finished my career in Austin, Texas, where I was the lead night side and lead investigative reporter, worked with different government officials and agencies throughout my reporting career, covering the police department and municipalities. And when I left the news business, I actually came back to Dallas, which is where I'm from, and went to the Dallas County District Attorney's Office, where I led communications and legislative affairs. Then I went over to the city of Dallas, where I led all of our external affairs, set up our anchor institutions program, did a little bit of a parallel stint at the Dallas Police Department to help them structure their communications and community engagement departments. Got my MBA, went to McKinsey. I'm also a recovering consultant as well. I was the external relations and communications lead for the state of Texas. And now I am back at the city where I oversee communications, government affairs, and the mayor and city council office. I was sharing with Angela earlier, Angela and Lee rather, earlier, that at the city of Dallas, we're really creating more of a corporate structure, if you will, for communication. So building that out has been fun, and working with our team and trying to get some processes in place and branding refresh and all of that good stuff. So here we are today. We actually do use Zencity for our communications and engagement efforts to help us inform our council members, and also help us inform how we look at strategy around how we can better engage and create two-way engagement with our residents and stakeholders. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Lee.
Thank you. And now we're going to go ahead and just ask our audience to tell us a little bit about you. We have a couple of polling questions, so we can make sure that we hit the right context of who everybody is. So I'll give you all a second or two to just take the poll, and then we'll move on from there. So just to let you know, there's not going to be any death by PowerPoint in this presentation. We are going to have a conversation with Angela and Elizabeth on misinformation. And I'm sort of going to throw out some questions to them starting now. So the first question really is, I mean, we've all experienced in our careers some expectation that there's going to be misinformation that surfaces. But tell me what keeps you up at night about misinformation. I used to tell people I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 2 hours and cry. But I think, now that I'm on the other side, I worry a little less about information, but you guys must think about it constantly. So who wants to take the first shot at that?
I'll jump in. Great question, and interesting that Elizabeth mentioned Zencity to inform her elected officials. That's the first thing I think of when I think about waking up in the middle of the night. I sleep really well. I do not wake up. I have learned that wellness is very important factor of being a PIO or in any communications role. So you got to have that balance. But if I did wake up, or if I see something in the morning when I start my day with a cup of coffee and Zencity, no kidding, to see what's kind of going on in the community. If there is something, the first thing I think of is our elected officials and our town manager's office also seeing those. We are a size of town that, like, if there's something going on, folks call the mayor directly. They start calling our town leaders directly, just bypass communications and go right to the mayor. So that is the first thing I think of is, oh gosh, are they jumping in there and reacting too fast? Yes, we need to get correct any misinformation, or get educational information out there to address the topic, but we need to take a breath, make sure that it's all the information that we're covering everything instead of just piecemealing out all day reacting to misinformation.
Okay. Elizabeth, you sleep well at nights too?
No. I mean, we have, 13,000 team members, a more than $5 billion budget. Our city manager, she's amazing. And I will say this, I would like to give a plug to our city manager, to be honest with you, because she is great about communications and recognizes how important it is and how important it is that we get ahead of the misinformation. But like Angela, I do think that keeps me up at night, is wondering if is misinformation rather out there, and how quickly is it circling like a tornado, and how wide is it going to spread? I can tell you, there have been a couple of times recently. I'm not sure if everybody on this call is familiar with, your own city's charter, your own town's charter. We had some charter amendments that passed, and there was a lot of misinformation circling about the charter amendments because we as a city could not get engaged really in that conversation. We sort of had to stand back and watch. And then when the charter amendments passed, we had to be really reactive to it. So we are used to we want to be a proactive city, but it really is about how do you react when you can't get ahead of the misinformation, and how do you make sure that you're getting it out there as quickly as possible so that we don't have sort of what does happen, and Angela's right, is we have people that reach out to our mayor, our city council, and we're often fielding that. I personally feel that a lot. And so that definitely keeps me up at night. That and waking up to a headline that I don't know that is going to come down the pipeline.
If you don't read the papers, you don't have to worry about the headlines, right?
Well, I will tell you, it's funny you say that because I've stopped reading the papers over the last couple of weeks, because that definitely gives me anxiety. Is when we're having a huge organization. We've tried to really streamline our communications process. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, and I read about a story in the paper where some people have, gone and spoken to the news, and that fuels the misinformation. So yeah, I might start reading the paper again next week. I think I needed a break.
So at least my history with misinformation puts people into two categories, maybe three. So you have the instigator, the creator of the misinformation, right? And then you have spreaders, right? The people that take that information and just push it out to all their sources in the community. And then maybe a third group, the believers, right? So let's talk a second about how do you identify the source and the spreaders in your community? Do you immediately know who this is coming from? Do you have to dig deep to find it? Do you have any special techniques?
Well, I mean, I know for us at the city, it's interesting because, we are such a large municipality that we do have a lot of folks spreading on Facebook, for example. But I will tell you guys kind of an anecdotal story. My group of friends in Dallas, while it's a very big city, it does have, it can be like a small community. And I had a group of friends and we were out to dinner and they were asking me about something that I just thought was such a wild accusation about what could be going on within some neighborhoods, that I really dismissed it. And so I, and then it started popping up at City Hall, and we tried to find if it was accurate, because it was related to some criminal activity. And a lot of times, I don't know if y'all's police departments are like this, but a lot of times ours are, always investigating things. And so it's hard for them to even tell the communications team what's going on. And so then the information just keeps spreading. We say it's false, and then some of it's true, and then some of it's not. So then we have to kind of, reevaluate What are we doing? Do we get on social media immediately and combat that? Or do we just let people sort of spin? So for us, it kind of comes in every direction. We do have a couple of the same people that like to spread the information and help, solidify the believers.
Angela, how about for Frederick?
A couple points come to mind. I am very fortunate here in Frederick in the sense that our communication from the town is centralized. So I think that's like my world versus Elizabeth is probably a lot, a lot of differences, but yet I think we have daily the same kind of issues that come up as far just as how people behave. When it comes to finding the source, a lot of times if it's just kind of a one-off situation, I'm not concerned about who that person is necessarily, but it's my job to get in there and define what is true and accurate. And I really try hard not to just immediately defend, like be on the defensive, but I think it's much more well received when the town is, um, the source of the best information, and that's all going to go back to building trust with your community. And so I would say, if anything, that's my biggest takeaway with social media is building that trust with the community, because a lot of times now I have to, if something pops up, I know that I can sit back, breathe, wait for my community cheerleaders to jump in there, and they will start answering with the right information. If people ask a legitimate question, let's answer it. Let's answer it with, accurate information that's not, you definitely have to come across as not being defensive or, lack of a better word, snotty, right? Like we are very down to earth here. And, even if it's an opinion or a question that may want to lead that, I might think that they want to lead somebody in another course, like it's like, look, the town is bad. We can always learn from everybody's comments when it's a legitimate comment or question. So, then you have, like you said, Lee, everybody has their, depending, on this, how many followers you have, et cetera. You have your 5 to 10 people that you know who they are. And in that instance, over the years, I have humanized the, Town of Frederick Facebook page. You're not talking to a logo. I will reach out and engage with those folks one-on-one. I'm the first one to go up and introduce myself at a town event or a program, or reach out to them and say, hey, I'm Angela. I'm the person that you actually talked to behind the logo. And then they kind of right away start getting, oh, but I'm like, no, I love that you are our eyes for our community. And I'd love to talk more with you and invite you in and get you involved in something you're passionate about.
So when somebody posts information on a Facebook page and it's not yours, do either of you go back onto those Facebook pages and correct the information?
If I could jump in, our situation is a little bit unique because a lot of people confuse the city of Dallas with Dallas County. And so that's also something that we're battling, right? If we as a city, so we're just one city within Dallas County, which is 26 or 27 cities, but we share the word Dallas. So sometimes that misinformation doesn't even relate to us, right? But we have great relationships with our partner agencies. I will tell you, one of the things that we've been working through with the city is that all of our departments have their own, not all of them, but many of our departments have their own social media pages. So Twitter, Facebook, et cetera. And so what we're doing to sort of bring down the likelihood of the misinformation is really trying to migrate all of those social media pages back through to our centralized page, so that we can be one source for information, not only on social media, but we're building a separate news hub where we can provide proactive information, even if it's not good information. We want to be transparent and accountable. Personally, I would like to get on other people's Facebook pages and comment and tell them that the information is wrong. But I find that what I have found is when you do that in the city like ours, you tend to just keep the conversation rolling versus just sort of take an entire kind of city stance and put it out as a city. So I think that where I am right now is we have to look at, as what Angela is saying, is what's credible and what's not. I mean, if somebody has a legitimate concern that is, widespread or information that a lot of people are saying around the community, et cetera, where it's not accurate, we want to get ahead of that. But if it's just one person, saying they didn't like how much their water bill cost, or the city is overcharging for water, which is, could be misinformation, we do not tackle those individually.
So let's talk about the misinformation creator. What do you do if that person is internal to your organization? The unidentified source, the disgruntled employee, the person who thinks the information may actually be true and just happens to be pushing it out.
So, Angela, do you want to take that first since I took the last one, or I can? I mean, I have a pretty succinct answer for that.
Right. I'm glad you do. All I was going to say is I was going to go back to the last question and say, Lee, I as well do not go in there and jump into those community Facebook groups a lot, but I will reach out to some of the moderators or administrators and thank them for sharing our correct information. So yeah, Elizabeth, this question, that's all you.
Well, we do, because we do have a big organization, right? And I will tell you, oddly enough, what's been really interesting about the communications journey and where I sit is we have worked really hard under our city manager. Again, she is a rock star, who is all about the culture of our organization, right? And so when she became the interim city manager, she really changed the culture of our organization about being accountable, responsive, transparent, come to us, come to people in the organization. I mean, I think you're always going to have, the person that maybe doesn't like their job. That's in any organization. We've been really fortunate because we at the executive level are out there getting ahead of the information. If it's something big, we are, we've been really, really fortunate. I will say, Lee, though, there is an incident that happened at the city where it was it's been all over the news. I don't know if it's made national news, but the city many years ago bought a building that was supposed to be a one-stop permitting shop. And we had some internal issues with permitting. This is before our now city manager, before she was the interim. There were some people that moved in there and they were talking to the press about the building because they were frustrated that the building, wasn't properly permitted. They were moved in there, et cetera, et cetera. And Kim had just been appointed as the interim city manager, and the directive that she gave to us and publicly gave to the city council was, we're going to get to the bottom of this. And we're going to figure out, why this happened, how this happened. And at the same time, she launched an investigation. She brought in an outside entity, brought in an investigation to do an independent investigation. Our auditor launched their own investigation, and she went public with her findings before the auditor even came out. And so I think a lot of what we're showing our team internally, to your point, Lee, about what if the misinformation spreader is internal? What we're doing is actually starting at the top by opening the windows and the doors, and it makes it hard for people, I think, internally, that aren't sort of, I think it makes it harder for people to want to share misinformation because we're so open and honest, and transparent and accountable. That's our mantra. That's our mission. People know that. And so I do think it's a little bit harder. And I will say this, one other thing that we do, which I love that our city manager has been open and embraced it, is that we go to our 13,000 team members and give them the information first. That's what we do. Anytime we will always share the information with city council, and 1 second after we press the button with city council, we share it to all of our department directors, and assistant directors with the intent that they're going to share it with the rest of the organization. But we oftentimes will send out announcements from her citywide about major city things that are going on, so that she can be the source, the immediate first source of the information.
So I've given you both some softballs on there. Let me throw you a curveball for a second. So you all ultimately report up to the town manager or the city manager. They have bosses. What happens when the misinformation is coming from one of their bosses?
This call's being recorded, right? I think I'm going to take the fifth on that. I think I'm going to take the fifth on that question, Lee.
So let me rephrase it then. What advice would you give to the people who are listening if they were ever in that situation?
I will tell you what we do immediately is we put together an overview and FAQs about the issue and immediately send it to the city council. We share it with the public. We post it on our website. We email it to the entire city. We like to get ahead of it, as quickly as possible and provide resources. Now that's not always gonna, and I think Angela can probably relate to this. That's not gonna always happen when you're in the middle of a city council or town council meeting and they're live and on the record. I mean, I'm standing in the background wanting to raise my hands, and say, wait a minute, this isn't the correct information. We can't interrupt them, but we try to follow up and try to put out that correct information when there is misinformation out there during that type of meeting.
Angela, how about you?
Yeah, Elizabeth is bringing up points that, like, wow, it's eye-opening. My town and her town, and these situations are not that different after all. And back to the disgruntled employee, giving out information and talking about your elected officials. That's the same for us. Culture, culture, culture. And it comes down to building that trust, right? And this is all, it's all around. So if we have that trust built with our employees, with our elected officials, with the town manager's office, that we are the professionals here who know what to do, and we are putting out the right information, it's going to be well received, and they're not going to feel the need to jump in there and put out information before us. So again, it's like taking that breath, that step back. Communications team's got this, and for our elected officials, just making sure they are informed. And back to what Elizabeth said, if there is something going on, if it involves, a news release, we are sharing that internally first with our elected officials and town manager's office. And immediately, I love that you said that, Elizabeth, that we are hitting that button right to our town employees first and foremost, right? And then they know now to, if anybody's asking them questions, because in any community, residents are going to see a public works person or a police officer or their mayor, and they're going to start asking them questions, and they'll be armed with the right information because we have put it out. Talking to Lee a couple days ago, I just wrote down the thought that, like, misinformation starts with us. So
if we are the trusted source and we have those values with our internal team and that culture built, it's going to help out in a lot of these situations.
So
I
we're
want to add something. We also have something, it's sort of interesting. We have a 311 system and we have an app, and it's something we're navigating right now, like right this very minute, is that when we built the app back in 2018, it was custom. And so because it's custom, it's been hard for us to build new notification templates. And so you can imagine when people are putting in their pothole, for example, what happens is if somebody gets the service request and they go look at the pothole, and it may not be transportation and public works, it may be a different department, the ticket looks like it's closed, but on the back end, it's really referred. And so a lot of times, or we have been losing or had lost a lot of public trust just based on the fact that people were thinking we weren't responsive, when in reality, it's because the ticket had to be closed, referred, and transferred. So sometimes that's uncontrollable, right? And so we've been having to do a lot of this kind of over communicating to help people understand here how we have some technology limitations, to be quite honest. And even though we're so big and have such a large budget, our technology limitations sometimes actually creates the misinformation loop. And it was the same thing with our permitting department. We had a lot of permits were on paper. We were migrating. We just launched it's called Dallas Now, a new one-stop permitting shop. We had a reputation for permits taking forever and ever and ever, when in reality, it was the technology, yes, the people and some of the not the people, but some of the processes, but sometimes the technology can be that driver, what is creating the misinformation out there. And if anybody has an answer for that, I'm happy if somebody wants to put in the chat how to get our city, $100 million to go, level up our technology right away. That would be helpful. But I mean, it's really as simple as we are looking at reevaluating, do we really need to have a standalone 311 app, or do we have a website that's mobile responsive so that we can provide information faster on those service requests, so that we maintain the reputation, or not reputation, but the trust with our community, so that they're not putting out the misinformation.
it's that old adage, it takes years to build trust, it takes a second to destroy it.
Hmm.
So there were two comments that were in chat I sort of want to maybe put together on there. Lori made a comment about, you're both from different sized cities. She's from a city of about 250,000 people, 250,000. Angela, you guys pretty much have a centralized system of PIO. So messaging is maybe a little bit more precise. Elizabeth, you all have PIOs spread all throughout the city of Dallas. So messaging may be more difficult to make it consistent between entities. If you were in a city of 250,000, would you be trying to have one department, one entity to respond to misinformation, or are you kind of fine with the idea of multiple? And Angela, if you were in a bigger organization, can one department in your mind handle all that? I mean, you see the volume of stuff coming through your desk.
Yeah. I'll start off, and I'm sure Elizabeth has some great thoughts. If I had different departments doing their own communications in a bigger town or city, I could see where that is helpful, right? Like people would get used to the public works department or road work, seeing what's going on. They know they could go there and not get lost in all the other topics. So I would foresee having extensive training for that person, making sure that kind of the town communications has regular and specific training and brainstorming sessions and brand consistency throughout each department. So that would be my first thought. I don't know if that's right, but I would love to learn how Elizabeth does it. Do they have, brand consistency across all these different platforms? Do you get together? Do you have trainings so that you're all kind of on the same page with your responses?
So historically, the city has been used, the city communications, the way that the city communications has worked previously, is that every department could hire their own PIO. Some departments have four, and they call them either PIOs or communication specialists. I'll tell you, one of the reasons that I was so excited about going back to the city, and I had previously worked for Kim in my previous role, but one of the reasons I was so excited about going back and working for her specifically was because she does uniquely understand the need for the fluidity in branding and messaging. And so that's something that we had struggled with at the city previously. While everybody would see the logo, we were putting out different messaging and different, we weren't fluid. And so it's been a work in progress. Lori, I love your question. For me, I would say I would create a centralized, for me, I think having that, we are moving towards a centralized communications department. The way that Kim has structured our org chart, which I think is brilliant, and every city community should look at doing this way. She's created pillars across our organization. So we've got a safe pillar, which is where all of our public safety departments sit. We've got a fiscally sound pillar, which is where all our finance and risk management and HR sits. We've got a livable portfolio, which is where our sanitation, homeless services, code, Dallas Animal Services. So they're all kind of grouped, and where I'm trying to go towards, and we're struggling with our budget because we do have a revenue shortfall this year. But what I'd like to see is that we budget, instead of in all these different departments where they have their own PIOs, et cetera, where we have a sort of a spokesperson, if you will, for each of those pillars. And that was my vision coming back to the city, is centralizing all of our communications, but essentially having a spokesperson for each of those pillars who knows exactly what's going on in each of those pillars and is sort of the expert, if you will, the subject matter expert. And so the goal would be that those folks are able to coordinate the information that's flowing out and that's flowing in. And oftentimes what happens, because I do sit where I sit in the organization, even though I'm not directly over, I am over the department communications, I'm not the director of communications, but I often have greater purview into what's going on because of where I sit. And I think it's harder for me to help delineate or disseminate the information to my team so that they can, create the necessary communications outreach. And so I think, just in a nutshell, having that centralized department to be overseeing the overall branding, messaging, for the city is better. And then have, depending on your size, I think Lori, you're from a size of 250,000. I think it would be how many departments are in that, in that organizational structure. Can you, as the communications lead, in your mind, group those departments? I'm not saying go restructure your organization, but can you group, whether the departments are grouped by assistant city managers, if you will, or, how it's grouped, effectively have a lead, comms person for each of those. And then that way, it makes it easier to communicate with each other and communicate externally. And frankly, I will tell you, it would make it easier for you all to measure success. We've spent so much time treading water and measuring our success through how many social media, people, how many people follow our social media, how many people do we have interacting. I personally think, and this is just me, that's not the most effective way to measure engagement. That's just me. And so I think when you have it more centralized and you have more of a process and a structure, it's easier for you to see where your investment is being successful? Where is your trust being successful? And how are you successfully building your trust with your community?
Thanks.
But the reason I'm going on and on and on about this, to be honest, other than the fact that I can talk to a wall, is because this is something that we have been really looking and analyzing. And frankly, Lee has given me a lot of advice on this also over the last couple of months, just how we can, really make this a little more seamless for us as this in the size that we are. But I think even if you have the smallest number of people that are running a municipality, a centralized, it's always going to be better for branding.
Yeah.
Always from the ground up. And frankly, we have been sort of the way we've accomplished it is by helping our departments and getting the buy-in is by helping our departments understand, the size of our organization, frankly, is similar to a company like Apple. And so when you have an iPhone, if you will, that breaks, they're not going to the iPhone spokespeople, department and saying, oh, we're going to blame it on the iPhone. They're blaming it on Apple. And so that's much like the city of Dallas, regardless of what department it happens in, we, the city of Dallas, are responsible at the end of the day. And ultimately, that means we as the communications team are responsible at the end of the day.
And even if they're not things that the city of Dallas is directly responsible for anyway, you tend to share the burden of explaining that on there. I'm sorry, go ahead, Angela.
Can I jump in there real quick? Although we are smaller and our communications is centralized, we still have with each department, we call it our communicators group. And so it's like a spokesperson from each department has that direct link or tie-in to the communications team. That's great. That sounds like, oh, it's something that benefits us, but really, in a sneaky way, we are building those relationships with each department and showing them, hey, we want to tell your story. We want to spotlight you. That we want to show the town, what you're doing and build that respect and that trust and that, honest, proactive information. So it's centralized, but same kind of concept of the pillars. You have that communication spokesperson from each department.
Well, Angela, I just want to hop in, and I love what you just said because I want to just build on that for 1 second. So again, previous to my coming back to the city, every department was hiring communication specialists and all these things, which is great, but there really wasn't anybody on the panel of the interview panel to make sure that the person had the background. And so we are in a position at the city now where we're really having to sort of bring a lot of that back and say, okay, let's analyze, even though the departments are paying for it. We're having to analyze kind of who are the communication specialists for each of the departments and do they have the background? Because to Angela's point, it's not really just about, oh, we're going to respond to a media inquiry. It's about those departments know what they're doing and can talk about their good news. And if they have somebody that has that background in the department itself, working in that department, then it makes it easier for that department to be able to come to the comms team, the centralized comms team to say, hey, we really, we want to push this out there. And what's happening to us, because a lot of those people in the departments that have the titles don't necessarily have the background, we're having to go back and figure out the story and the strategy and et cetera, versus the coordination around the outreach. And so I appreciate that, Angela, because I do think you want to have the buy-in from the departments. I mean, that's critical. At the end of the day, it's critical. If the departments don't agree with the communications and wanting to work with communications, then it's really hard to have that fluid working relationship, regardless of who the mandate comes from.
So I want to jump to JP's comment about instigators and spreaders and feeding the beast. I'm often think about, the old adage that it may seem fun to feed the gorilla bananas, but you can't stop when you want to, right? So on there, and I've sort of always thought of communities, regardless of size, as bell curves, with 10% of the population being positive, 10% being negative, right? We've all heard that the positive 10% will tell everybody that potholes are traffic calming, and the negative 10% will complain if the streets are paved with gold, they'll say that there's too much glare on the road. So they'll complain about everything. But the real secret, I think, of managing misinformation is keeping the spreaders and influencers away from the 80% that are in the middle that can be influenced undeservedly, but influenced by these negative, leanings. And so maybe talk for a second about, how do you control misinformation from becoming a false narrative? Right? Because one piece of information could start building a whole story that just spirals out of control.
So for us, I think there's two sides of it, right? For the way I think about it is, well, you can only hope that there's only a 24-hour news cycle in that, right? But what happens when the 24 becomes, Lee, you were in Dallas and experienced this with me when the 24-hour news cycle turns into 6 days. I think that it's for us, we have to really navigate how do we spend our time, right? Are we going to spend our time, to JP's point, and helping them increase their activity, putting out all the time the facts to the misinformation? We look at how does the story affect our community, our residents, our stakeholders, and our brand reputation, right? And so if it's something that is just a microcosm of what we're doing every day, then, do we really need to start engaging in that? When it comes to our elected officials engaging in spreading unknowingly spreading the misinformation, then that becomes where we really, really get involved. But again, I will tell you, this conversation we're having today is really interesting because I think that when you as an organization can be really transparent and get ahead and out in front of things when they're coming down the pipeline, right, then I think that it helps you to manage that misinformation a lot easier. And so it's really a delicate balance and a fine line, but it's as much about building the internal trust, so that people aren't afraid. I had people, and I still have people afraid to come and tell me what, some major things that are coming down the pipeline, because my first reaction is, well, we need to tell everybody about it. Better off telling everybody about it now than, letting it go under the radar, right? And look, we're dealing with this situation today at 12:47. I will tell, if you don't mind, I'll tell you an interesting story. We have an issue with coyotes in Dallas, and we have a contract with the USDA and has had it for a really long time, that it's some kind of agreement where they can minimize the coyote population if it's a pack and they're aggressive and they can't do anything to disperse them. The USDA can come in and actually take them out. That's the USDA, right? But we have right now today, it just so happens one of our marshals, shot a coyote in self-defense because it attacked him, right? Now we have other news stations calling, asking about the coyote issue. So, I said, we need to go out and do a press release about this and let everybody know this is an issue. And that's something we're talking about right now is, do we tell everybody that this is, coyote season and this is where we are? And you may see this, kind of, get to the bubble up to the top. I think it's, it's how do we navigate that? And for me, what I'm looking at is it in our major parks or is it on the outskirts of the city where this is going to happen? Right? Where it happened with the marshal was in a well-known park that is frequented, but it's my understanding, I have to do some more research with our team, is where they come out are in sort of the outlier areas. So, I mean, it's like, do you have everybody panic now? Or do you come out and say to them, well, look, this happens every year after it's over. So I think it's really just depends on what is the event. And how do you navigate it in that moment, can actually end up defining you with how the information ends up being received.
So, and Angela, maybe if you can speak to this in the context of your famous homicide, and that story that has now been over a decade of just coming back and back on there. How do you stop feeding it?
So, our homicide in 2018 was that it gained national attention and, has several movies out there that are, quote, documentary style movies. Um, it's been sensationalized, but when it first happened, we immediately came out, thank goodness, at the time, and had a news conference stating this is what we know. And we had those relationships with the media. Again, back to trust. Build those relationships. Don't be afraid of the media. They're doing their job. And if you have that relationship, that's a big part of it. But for people in the community and now people worldwide sitting wherever they are and sending us Facebook messages, direct messages, and it could be a post of like, we're hiring police officer recruits. When are you going to arrest so and so? At this, because we did a really good job at the beginning of being transparent, this is the information we can share, wrapping it up. This is what happened. And now it's with the, DA's office. And we're very firm about it's, when it was over, it was over. But now we do not react to the armchair detectives who still reach out. We're not going to fuel that fire. We just aren't. And I truly believe if we did react in any way, they would be so excited, even if we, put a thumbs down, which I've never done, but like, or any kind of reaction to their post or comment is just going to fuel that fire. So we're not going to feed it.
So Stephen posted about how does an organization maintain public trust when a situation is under investigation or has confidentiality? And before you all chime in on that, I sort of want to point to what I think is the best example I have ever seen. And that was with the unfortunate shooting in the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. I forget how long ago it was, at least a decade ago, right? Up there.
15. Yeah.
And the reason why that was so effective in my mind was you had the police chief who came to the microphone at every press conference and basically said, this is what I can tell you now. This is what I can't tell you now. This is why I can't tell it to you now. Here are experts. They can tell you about some stuff. I'm not going to guess about it. And I think this is the most important thing. And we will be back to you at whatever time. And he would state a time. And they would come back punctual and provide more information on there. To me, it was sort of, very comforting and a good way of demonstrating to the public that, we will tell you what we can tell you when we can tell you, and we will tell you when we can tell you stuff. And I think that went a long way to keeping the community abreast and keeping that trust on there. I don't know if either you have other examples or want to comment on that.
Uh, First of all, Lee, I'm so glad you mentioned, I was so anxious to bring that up. I was like, you have to develop that battle rhythm, right? Like that, the next news conference, we'll be doing news conferences on the hour, you know, and until, 4 o'clock, or you have to establish that. And even if you don't have more information, if you're going out, you're still going out there. You're still, relaying those safety messages. Are you safe? Yes, the community is safe. You're still relaying those messages, answering the questions that you can answer. But yeah, you have to develop that kind of you are back out there. So we're not all left wondering, when are we going to know more information? So thank you for mentioning that.
A lot of times we get when, and I'm just want to speak about reporters and, specifically, that are, when they're working on stories about issues that we might not be able to talk about. Stephen, you brought up a really good point about, if it's under investigation, or in our case, sometimes we have litigation going on. And the litigation is a little more challenging to deal with than being under investigation, because when something's under investigation, to what Angela and Lee are saying, we say, here's what we know. It is under investigation. Once we have more information, we will provide, that information to you. We don't always have the date, right, that we're going to be able to provide it, but we try as much as possible to push our police department even, to kind of, when you have more information, we got to give them more information, as we, that's going to obviously not do anything to jeopardize the integrity of the investigation, but be able to provide that kind of information. I'm not talking about when the public is under threat. I'm talking about general questions. But lately, because again, our city is so visible, and because we're becoming such a large city, we do have a lot of litigation going on. We have these charter propositions that were passed. One of them does allow for anybody in the city that wants to sue us, they can sue us. If they don't feel like we've picked up their trash, they can sue us. And so what happens is if the city gets served, and the trash thing, I think there's some, I hope there are some parameters around it, but I'm using that as an example. What ends up happening is if the city ends up getting served, that typically gets out to reporters. And all we really can say is that, we've received, are aware of it, and we'll provide updates as they are appropriate. And I will tell you, we make it a point to go back to follow up with those reporters as the situation progresses, because I don't ever want to be in a situation where we've never closed the loop. And that's something that we have not always been great at the city, is that follow up. But I think the more that you follow up in situations where, you, even if you don't have any new information, you can at least say, I just want you to know this is still working its way through. And this is on our radar, and we will get back to you when we can.
Thanks.
It's just having that open line of communication, I think.
So we're going to have to wrap up. I'd like to, thank both Angela and Elizabeth for taking time out of their day. I think this has been very informative. But before we go, I'd love to hear from our audience in terms of how Zencity can potentially help you fulfill your needs. We are actively engaged with both the city of Dallas and the town of Frederick, and I think we have a lot of things that we can help you all with as well. This is not intended to be a sales pitch, but I did want to let you know that we are sponsoring today, and hope that you all got something great out of it. Again, I want to thank Angela and Elizabeth. You all were great, and I know I learned a lot from this conversation. I hope you guys had a good time doing it. So thank you. And Julian, I think that is our sign to wrap up.
Thanks. And Lee, if you want to give, and I mean, if anybody wants to reach out to me with any questions, or I just love to connect with people that are in information sharing. And I know some of you guys had some really interesting questions, and I'd love to kind of pose those questions to you all. Also, I'd be kind of curious to get your insight on how you're navigating some of that. So if anybody wants my email, it's very easy, elizabeth.saab@dallas.gov.
All right. Well, with that, we must conclude today's webinar. A special thank you to our presenters and to everyone who joined us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Please take a moment to complete a brief evaluation of today's program by returning to the ICMA Learning Lab page where you logged in today. The survey must be completed to unlock your certificate for this program. After completing the survey, you can access your certificate via the Achievements tab at the top of the interface. A recording of today's session will be uploaded to the same place you found the Zoom link in the Learning Lab. Today's program is copyright 2025 by the International City County Management Association with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. You may now disconnect.